Welcome back to part 2 of the Virtual Cafe Summer Speaker Series. Oh, that's a mouthful. With Steph, who is talking to us about the journey to studio ownership. So if you haven't already watched part 1, make sure you go back and watch that, because we are going to dive straight back into the episode today, where we're going to kick off where we left off and talk all about franchising, as well as creating a business plan and all the things that come along with it. Incredible job on that. Okay, so more business specifics. So the nitty gritty stuff about opening a business. So the things that people, like, we won't go into in depth with, because it will just take us forever, but things that people need to think about before opening a business. What would be involved in a business plan? What are the...
Well, the first thing you have to think about is your company and how it's going to be set up. How are you going to be as a business? So there are very many options. I won't go into detail here, but you need to make a decision on how your company exists. Are you going to be a sole trader for a period of time, but you can only do that to a particular threshold? And then you've got to start paying GST, which is Australia. So how are you going to be set up? You need to then get yourself set up with your local government. And then from there, you got to figure out how you're going to finance it. You need to figure out what let's say you're just starting your own, well, you got to make the decision on your own brand, license, franchise. If it's a franchise, you'll probably go to them, say, I want to open up a addictive pole fitness. They'll turn around and go, okay, here's everything you need to do. Your accounting program, your this, your that. You don't have to think about it. So yeah, you've got your initial setup, but if you're going out on your own, or either way, you've got to make a decision on how you're financing it. Being the industry we're in and having, I obviously can't give financial advice, but what I noticed in the struggle I had at the time, or when I was starting to think about it, is going to a bank with a business plan for a pole dancing studio is going to be really hard, because they don't understand your business. They don't understand the industry. You can't go into, there's these things called IBIS reports, business reports, that exist on most industries. You can't go in and type in pole fitness and figure out how many people are in pole fitness, how the industry is going. You have to sell that and try to sell that extra. So a lot of the people I know have used friends, family, own money to be able to save their own money to be able to buy into these things. So all used a hybrid, because they've got enough capital or equity in, let's say, a house to be able to buy a studio. So you've got to think about how you're going to finance it. Once you've financed it, you've got to figure out what your structure looks like. You're obviously the director of the business. Who are you going to have underneath you? Are you going to do everything? Are you going to have an administration person? Are you going to have a head instructor because you don't have that ability? Are you then going to create your own syllabus? What does that look like? If you're opening from scratch, I know our studio started just from beginners, and that's all they offered to until they went up through all the levels. You need to get a music license. Yes. If you want to play licensed music, like Justin Bieber is the first person that came to my mind right now. If you want some beeps on the background while you're dancing, you need a license. And there are studios, and I'm a part of quite a few Facebook groups, and there are studios that use royalty-free music only. I know I requested mine. Some of my instructors did that when we were creating content for YouTube, so we didn't get the copyright claim. So you've got to make that decision. You need insurance. Don't not get insurance. I think you need it. Do you need it before you can?
You'll need building and contents insurance, but then you'll also potentially need insurance to cover your instructors, so liability insurance. And then you got to figure out whether your instructors themselves need liability insurance, or whether your insurance covers their liability. So there's lots of things to look into for that.
Are your instructors going to be employees or subcontractors? Yeah. That's another decision.
I was going to say, are your instructors covered because they are or aren't fitness instructors? So you might have to look at, insurance details as to whether the requirement is that they have a bare minimum qualification within the fitness industry, which some, pole studios require. So is there a minimum certification that's required versus, none whatsoever? Does that change insurance premiums, or does it, do they disqualify them from being able to be insured because they're not actually covered? So yeah, lots of different things from that point of view.
And the other thing that makes me think that, like, you're 100% right there, and all my instructors have to have a qualification for me to be able to have insurance. What type of rigging are you going to use in your studio? Like, how are you going to get that? Is that safe? Is it going to be okay for people to do phoenixes on, or whatever else? What is your health screen form like? Your liability waiver, your terms and conditions, your privacy policy.
Maintenance, so your equipment maintenance for safety perspective. So what's your ongoing, safety procedure? What's your first aid procedure? What's your, your immediate response?
Does everybody have first aid? Is that going to be a requirement, or are you going to have a first aid officer on every night? Work cover is another one. If you have, in Australia, you have to have work cover. Every state has their own different types of cover. Like in Queensland, I can only have it from one provider, but I know in Victoria, where Simone is, you have a variety of providers who can offer that. And how are you going to, a big one, one of the biggest things I learned being in business finance is about tax and super. At the end of the day, tax is not your money. You are just a collector on behalf of the government, wherever you are, to take that money, hold it, and pay it when it's due. Same with super. You need to pay your tax, you need to pay your super. If you can't pay your tax and the ability is there, go into a payment arrangement with the ATO, because they can literally come in and garnish your bank accounts and take whatever money is in there. So that was one of the biggest things that I learned, is like, pay your tax, pay it on time. It is not your money. Always save it.
Correct. And yeah, like mentally go, okay, I need to put this much money aside. It is not my money. It might be sitting in this bank account, but it is not my money. It's not the FGS money. It's tax and super. And I was going to say, for those who are international, you have no idea. Well, I imagine superannuation that's there for some countries. Again, I don't know what.
I'm not sure with super. I'm not sure what that looks like in other countries. I obviously tax, or what we call GST. I think in the US is VAT.
VAT.
Yeah. So, and that's different in every state. But yeah.
If there's something like that. Basically, in Australia, we are required to pay superannuation to employees, where we put a small amount of money into a fund that they can only access after a certain age, from a retirement point of view. So it's basically to ensure that people don't go broke in the long term, because we're living longer, and people are retiring still around the age of 65. So or 60, 65. So it's just in terms of a long-term insurance. And that money is not additional money from us. It is a percentage. Actually, is additional money from us?
Yeah, so they get paid. So just say you pay your instructor $30 an hour, you have to pay an additional, at the moment, I think it's like 10.5% on top of that. So it was 9.25 for so long. So like on a podcast episode I did about the instructor pays, they were saying in Australia it's going up to like 12% slowly.
Yes, it's up to 12 and a half, I believe. 12 and a half by 2025. So that's another thing. If you are an employer, you need to be on top of these things to ensure that you are paying correct amounts, because at any point your employees could be going to Fair Work Australia to report you, to ensure. Hopefully they don't go straight to Fair Work. Hopefully they go straight to you. And
hopefully you've created an environment where they feel safe enough to come to you to be like, I checked my super balance and it's not there. So yeah, and like nobody's really the ATO, or I say ATO, that's the Australian Taxation Department office in Australia. They can audit, and they do regular audits. So not necessarily on everybody, but if you've got a couple of red flags or something's happened, or you've just been picked out by random, just like jury duty, they can obviously audit you to make sure you're doing all those right things. However, I don't want to say all those things and get people deterred from it, because like, it's super easy for me to work out how much tax I've got to put away in my accounting program. It tells me those things. So I just say, yep, they're on the statutory rate, which is whatever it is for Australian. And then when I run my payroll, it's like X amount is tax, X amount is this. And then my GST, I just have or my other tax, I just have a set amount to transfer every week. So I don't see it. Like, it just goes into a bank account. So super easy ways to go around it. But these are things you have to think about, and you have to make that decision on quite early, like, and I know setting up my bank account, you got to decide what bank account you're going to, like, what bank you're going to bank with.
You have to set up, so right back at the beginning, you have to set up an ABN for Australian businesses, so an Australian business number. If you're obviously international, you have to set up a business number with your government. But the other thing is you need to register your business name. And in Australia, that's done through ASICs, but that would be obviously a different company internationally. These are things that you need to think about, because you can't suddenly call your business something that this is for those who are starting up their business from scratch, obviously not from a franchise point of view, but you cannot call your business something without actually having the rights to be able to do it, and then finding out that someone else has actually named it. Now, that might be okay if you're in different states, and there's no direct issue in terms of competition. But if you've got Steph, you've got an addictive pole fitness, I'm going to set up an addictive pole fitness, 100 meters down the road, not going to fly. That is not going to happen. And first of all, ASICs wouldn't let that happen. But second, if there was, for some reason, I started to do that, you can obviously go to ASICs and then complaint could be made and so forth.
And because I don't think we touched on this yet. So I brought the studio, and then 12 months later, I brought the brand. So I now own the Addictive Pole Fitness brand. I'm no longer a licensee. It's trademarked. So it has a trademark associated with it. So if you were to do that with a franchise, you'd have that. If you had your own brand, you might not trademark it straight away, but it's definitely something you would want to think about doing. I know there's that story of Kylie Jenner who wanted to copyright the word Kylie, and then Australian Kylie was like, well, you can't do that.
Trademarked.
Yeah. Yeah, so she's already got that. So those are other things you have to think about. Domain, if you're going to set up a website, can you get the domain that you want? Like, and
handle, can you get the Facebook handle? Can you so many things from a social media.
I would recommend, even if you have no plans on going onto YouTube, TikTok, the other things, as soon as you decide on your business name, just go get the handle, because if you can be consistent across the board, it's going to make it that little bit easier. Do you create just a Gmail email account, or are you going to have your domain and then use your domain as, like, mine's is like at addictivepolefitness.com? Are you going to have that, or are you going to have addictivepolefitness@gmail.com?
A lot of times when you purchase a domain, it'll have an email option, so you'll get access to, at thepolephysio.com. But that's an extra purchase, so that's all going to cost money. And
yeah, I would say too, like, and I know we're not really going to talk about the finance stuff today, but like one of the things that really adds up is all these subscriptions that you have to have. Another one is, and this is something you'll probably want to think about early, what customer relationship management, so CRM is what they call it, program are you going to use? Like your booking system, the system that houses your customers' information. What are you going to use? Because you could probably start off super easy and just be like, we just take email bookings. But I am a person who is not going to go to a restaurant if I have to call up to make the reservation. I'm like,
not these days.
Online, or I'm not doing it. Like, no. Unless I really, really want to go there, then yeah, I'll like make the phone call. But I hate to do that. So like, you need to break down these barriers for the people who are going to be coming into your business. How do you break down those barriers? And you want to make it as easy as possible, because starting pole dancing is scary.
Yeah. I think about, for myself, from my own business point of view, I need to have, a management system, patient management system that allows me to securely ensure that notes are being stored. So I have to look at compliance. And so then your own industry might have certain regulations and requirements. I look at my telehealth platforms. I have to be HIPAA compliant, so a certain type of security compliant, to ensure that it meets my legislation and requirements. So there's so many other things that you have to think about paying for. Could come down to social media. Are you going to have a link in your bio that then takes them to a different page? You have to pay for things like that. Do you want to change URLs? If you want to shorten them and you want to put your brand on it, you have to pay for a URL shortener, and then you have to there's all these different things that you would not think about that are so hard because they don't integrate with each other.
They don't. You're like, I got automation over here and it's great. You don't talk to this one. Shit. Now what am I going to do here? Up until recently, Facebook's only just created a decent scheduler that posts both to Facebook and Instagram. You had to pay for that.
That's on my
So
to-do list, is to actually have a look at that, because I've got that for my summer to-do list, is because I at the moment am paying for something that helps me schedule a whole bunch of my posts, and now they've gotten something that's a fairly decent platform, but then you have to, the time and energy that you have to spend into understanding how to use a new platform, oh gosh, sometimes it's more just the time and effort. So sometimes
yeah.
down to the money, it just comes down to the, what do I have to do, how many hours do I need to put into this. I'm
And this is where a franchise can be beneficial.
Yeah, I was going to say accounting software. This is the one I messaged you about
Yeah.
yesterday. So I'm looking into accounting software at the moment. And I think I was cooking dinner and listening to a 45 or 50-minute video on how to utilize the basics of an accounting software. And then I think I have like 6 hours more videos to go through to actually figure out how to use this damn thing. So the energy and effort that you put in, it can be a lot. Again, we're not trying to turn you off, but we just like, let's be realistic about what it takes to run a business. It's not easy. Once you've got the processes in place, though, amazing. But
Mm-hmm.
the initial outlay of time, resources like finances, all of those things, it's a lot.
And even just deciding, I look at every one of my team and I look at them as an extension of my brand. And my brand is Addictive Pole Fitness. Do they live the same values, missions, goals, visions as I do? I don't want replicas. Like, I don't need 20 steps because we'll never get shit done. I'm not a tick boxer. I'm an idea and a visionary. We'll have 1,000 ideas and nothing happening. How do I create a team that is different enough, that complement me, and that I can work with, and who are going to serve the people the way that I want to serve my community? So you need to make that decision, because you will make hiring mistakes when you start off, and or you'll hire people, you'll train them, and then they'll leave because they're moving interstate. And I say this from experience. And if you're one of my employees that have done that, I still love you. I wish you were still here. I've got a couple that like left me interstate and internationally. But like, these things happen, and you spend time training them, and it's really hard to remove sometimes that personal like that, yeah, personal element away, to be like, this is a business decision. But Pole is a community, and you're generally friends with so many other people in it, that it becomes much more emotional. So boundaries are obviously important, but really hard to implement.
That was literally going to be my next question. So, because I struggle with this so much. So how, if you've got any tips, help me out. How do you run a business and not lose your sense of self? How do you put up boundaries?
That's really hard. And I think too, like, looking back on my experience, I literally was in survival mode for about 2 years. So for me, a lot of it was just like, this is what needs to be done. It needs to get done. So how can I keep my people happy while I'm trying to make change and make quick decisions? Because I had no other choice but to make quick decisions. In terms of losing yourself, you have to be disciplined with your time off. And I know both of us are really bad at this. We're like, guilty. But it, like, I, towards the end of last year, was absolutely burnt out. Could not get, there was a day I could not get out of bed. And it's because I let my boundaries down. I was letting things creep in that didn't need to, that weren't important. And one of my affirmations is in the back of my book that I read every morning. So I'm a big journaler. So for me, this is how I've really helped. And I use gratitude affirmations and just writing my brain down, because my brain thinks very quickly. So being able to write it out and see it on paper definitely helps for me. So you need to figure out what that self-care thing is for you and utilize that. And I dropped that off at that point in time. And I found myself just like getting into this rut, and I let down my boundaries. I was letting people's energy in that I didn't need to be letting in. I was letting things get to me that didn't need to. And I wasn't saying no to things I should have said no to. And there's sometimes personal things like, oh, I need to spend more time with my family, so I'm going to say yes to everything my family says. It's like, no, this isn't the right thing for me right now, because I'm coming up to the end of the year. A lot is going on. So you need to figure out, even simply figuring out, are you introverted or extroverted? If you're introverted, how do you recharge? If you're extroverted, like, still, like, being around people is great, but you do a lot of peopling, and the peopling isn't always positive. It's not always that, oh my God, you achieved that trick, you got your splits. Like, sometimes it's oh, you can't pay me this week, but you've still been attending my classes. Or, and see, even that, I said, you can't pay me this week. Even that, you need to distance yourself from that. You can't pay my business this week, or you can't pay the business, and you need to have a business hat. And my therapist has told me this many of times. I have to have a business hat and a Steph cap, and I can use both, but they've got to be separate.
That's a really, really important point. I definitely struggle with this, and this is hopefully this is my big goal for 2023, and I have yet to sit down and I like to, at the start of every year, create a mind map and a vision board, or like adjust my vision board that I've had the previous year. Sometimes there's long-term goals on there that are still applicable. And that is definitely one of the things for me for 2023 to work on, is to be able to separate myself more from the business. And not that I don't emotionally care, because I do care, but sometimes I care so much that as a physio, I'm such an energy giver. I let people take so much from me constantly because it's a part of my job, but it's how much I'm willing to give has to be from a business Simone versus a personal Simone. So once that starts crossing over the boundary and it starts coming and affecting into my personal life, that's a big issue. So learning that boundary hopefully this year will be a good challenge for me. But when you talk about like to-do lists and, you know, tasks that you want to do, and like as a physio, I'm working 9 to 5 with patients, I can easily find that I need to get shit done. It's going to happen after 5. So most of the time I'll find myself creeping into my dinner time, or after dinner I'll be up. People know me to be sitting on the couch at, up to midnight working on my business, or I'll be, my poor neighbors got the light on. They probably see me like most nights of the week working on my computer here, trying to get all the business stuff done. But one of the things I've done this year is take some designated time away from my patients. And I'm so lucky and grateful. I've got Jake and Danielle on board now to help out deal with the patient side of things, so that I can actually take a step back and get that is to-do list for summer. And there's more so you're a journaler. I can't journal. I just don't have mental capacity for it, but I need anything that's a to-do thing needs to go down on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
This mind has a certain amount of capacity and it can't handle everything all at once, so it needs to go on a piece of paper, and it's overwhelming to start with. But I tell you what, I think in the last couple of weeks, and almost halfway through it. So
Nice.
It's quite impressive, because we're still early on in my patients. I have, however, left some bigger tasks for later, so we're going to do that later. But I think we're going to get through that. But then I've also, in my time off, scheduled me time, where I'm like, these are non-negotiable weeks. And you have to do that as a business owner, is to go, this is me. And you know what? I may be happy for in that week to answer emails between this time and this time, maybe once every 2 days or every day. I'm happy to. So between 7 and 7:30 in the morning, and then you're done. That's it. You don't touch Instagram, you don't touch emails, and you have your away email on if you need to, or you don't. Up to you. But you basically need to stop doing lots of little things throughout the day and just get it done in that half an hour. And you told me that recently, is like, just answer your emails once a day. It will make you so much more productive.
Oh, so much more. When I was implementing that, so much more done. But like when I stopped the journaling, that was one thing that crept back in. Like I was checking my emails more regularly. But one thing you were talking about there, that I had this thought recently, that I definitely am non-negotiable in my sleep. Like that's one thing that I'm like, I'm normally in bed by maybe 10:30 latest. I wake up at maybe 6:30. I have pretty good sleep. But I was working on something at the end of last year, and I had so much to do on it. And I literally woke up the next morning and said to my husband, I'm like, I'm a really bad entrepreneur, because I won't stay up and work on my things. I'm like, sleep. It's time.
It's good.
So it is good. But like I think, and probably what's really important is to remember, and for those who are watching, is we're both of us failed pretty much 3 years into our business journeys. Yeah. So we're still learning and evolving, and you're going to evolve so much, like throughout your journey, and even 5, 10, 20 years in business, you're going to evolve.
We should have a night where both you and I, maybe 5 years time, 10 years down the track, we pull up this video and we watch it back. We'll have a girls' night, and we'll hopefully not have too many giggles. Hopefully most of this still stays very relevant 10 years down the track. But I was look back on ourselves and go, yeah, I can see.
Like now we're nailing it. Oh, holy shit. How have we not figured out boundaries yet? It's like 10 years later.
Hopefully not. But yeah, I am a shocker because I know if things need to get done, my bedtime is usually midnight-ish to 11:30 midnight, but I don't wake up early. So I will wake up at 8 o'clock the next day. I'm not a morning person. So everyone knows I'm not a morning person, but I'm the same. My sleep is non-negotiable. I need a minimum of 8 hours sleep.
Yeah.
But when I'm being a bad entrepreneur, I am staying up past midnight, and I will still wake up at 8 o'clock, but I've been known to stay up to 2 a.m. to work on. And I tell you what, my performance will significantly decrease, my mood will decrease, and it will affect everything. So
yeah,
it's just not.
And you just have to decide what your working style is when you start and how it is that you want to function. Like, I know when I had another business owner recently on the podcast, and we talked about business in particular, and she's like, 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning, if somebody can't book your class, that's you. 10 p.m. at night, if this thing can't happen, that's you. And I mean, I do have boundaries of like, especially now that I've got more people underneath me as a team, it's like, don't answer shit outside of your hours. Like, you're here to work, you're here to do what you need to do. Look, I do need, as a small business, and remembering these are small businesses, like you need flexibility in your employees to be able to jump on or jump off. You do need flexibility because you're generally a very small team that work in the business. If not, it's just you. You're working on the business predominantly. So you do need the flexibility, but you need to put in some boundaries. I would think it's unrealistic that a business gets back to me at 10 p.m. at night when I'm asking a question. And if I don't get back to them at 10 p.m. at night and that person then gets angry or isn't happy, they're not my customer. They're not my ideal customer. They're not the people I want in my space. And that's okay.
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. Nailed that 100%. And I was going to say, Australian wise as well, because you're going to be serving the Australian population. And that makes complete sense. I'm serving international market. People are emailing me, messaging me at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. I'm not responding. I still set those boundaries. So I don't respond after
That's a really good point. Yeah. Like I did not even think about that. Be like, oh, like I wouldn't expect this. But if I was emailing somebody in the US when I go to bed at 9 o'clock at night, I probably expect a response by the time I wake up. Like,
absolutely. Yeah. These are things to consider. Consider time zones. For me, it took me a very long time to get over the anxiety of turning on my phone the next day and, sit in bed for a little bit. I try not to look at my phone first thing, get up. Then I put phone time on, which I'll then sort through all the Instagram messages and emails. And it took me a while to get used to any sort of anxiety, particularly with a bigger Instagram platform, of waking up and not knowing what to expect, because you could wake up, you could post something at 11 o'clock at night, or it automatically gets posted through the scheduler, and then it's hitting the international market, so the US, Europe population, they're seeing it, they're commenting. You don't know what's being said overnight, and then having to wake up the next morning potentially dealing with a shitstorm.
Yep. I've had, and like, cause we've got a TikTok presence, and predominantly in the US, when we were kicking off earlier this year or last year, I would wake up and first thing I'd do is check my phone because I didn't know what was to come. And that was very challenging time to get through and to mentally process because, all these things are happening. And, there's been 3 mornings I've woken up through just in the last 12 months where shit has gone really bad on social media. And I've had to deal with that first thing in the morning. And yeah, I can completely resonate with that. If you put yourself out there on a platform, you do risk these things, and it is a part of doing it, but you as the business owner can make that decision on what you will and won't allow on your social media. But it doesn't make it any easier, and there's probably going to be tears.
Yeah, you've got to remember there's a person behind every business. There's a person behind every social media. And whilst you might have an issue with that person or that comment or that post or whatever, they're still a person. There's no need to be rude. I think that's what a lot of people forget.
Keyboard warriors.
So during we're going to bring this back to business in a second, but during the disability blog that we did in Christmas, most people were very appreciative of it, that's for sure. And that was probably one of the hardest times of last year, was, you know, wrapping up patients for the year, dealing with a whole bunch of things, but also making sure that the information we put out in that disability series was on point, because I'm very aware that I'm an able-bodied, you know, polar. I have never experienced anything that's significantly or, you know, for a short-term disabled me or a long-term disabled me. So I'm talking about a community where I'm trying to provide representation and awareness of their conditions, but I'm not wanting to represent them myself. So I'm trying to bring light to them, what's actually, so to the community, what's actually happening. And so I was really conscious of, you know, wording and trying to appease everyone, and it's certainly hard to do. Can't do that. Learned that very quickly in pretty much the first couple of days of that posting. You know, some polars, they like to be referred to as disabled polars, versus others will take offense to that. They want to be polars with disabilities. So like literally terms like that, I was just like, this is so overwhelming. And I already knew about this, but I didn't think so many people would take offense, because I'd done my research, or I thought I'd done my research. I'd spoken to people that we'd interviewed. They all felt a certain way, but then a whole bunch of popular people were like, no, I don't feel that way. So
you don't know what you post is going to get attention of. And we've had that similar situation of calling shoes pole shoes or pole heels on TikTok, and then a lot of people taking offense because we didn't call them stripper heels. So it's, you don't know how people are going to feel about what you put out there.
So there was one day that I went, nah, I'm done. My mental health is significantly deteriorating. I need to take care of myself. I also was very, very unwell in December, which Steph and I were chatting about pre all of this. I had multiple infections. I almost got hospitalized one day, and I went, nope. If I hadn't passed my threshold already, like, this is it. And I literally got comments on one of my posts, and I was like, not dealing with this, not today, not this week. And I never put them back on, because I was like, you know what? I just don't have to. You have to learn barriers. And that, for me, that was me going, I'm generally really open with the pole community. I try to give as much as I can from a business perspective, but this is my boundary, and I'm done for today. I'm done for this week on this point. So I think dealing with difficult customers, or not even customers, but just difficult people within the community, it's a challenge, but that's something that you have to, as a business owner, expect. That's for sure.
Yeah, especially like if you've got a weekly membership where people pay, you may have to become a debt collector at one point. You might have people who are unhappy with something that you've done, so they will target you, whether that be through public forums like social media or Google reviews. They might take you to the ombudsman because of the way your contract is done. So there are going to be trying times, and you're just like, you've got to remember your why, because these moments when somebody who quite clearly may, like, is not, I wouldn't say blackmailing you, but trying to get what they want.
Yeah.
And you're not giving it to them because it doesn't align with your business policy. That is something I would definitely say, is make sure you know your policies and you stick to them.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you give an inch, it just goes a mile. And then you have to say yes to everybody who wants like a free week or this or that. Like, you've got to be very careful about what you say yes to. And yeah, if you have policies, try to stick to them as much as you can, because what that does is that creates an understanding between you and your customer. And I put all my policies online, so everything is there except for my internal policies. So everybody knows what to expect, and they've all got access to it. I'm not trying to hide. It's really clear, but that's the language you're speaking, is your policies. That's how they act. That's how you act. And you need to abide by them just as much as they need to.
Yeah. And I'd say the only other thing I'd add to that is about, for you personally, ensuring that you're resilient, or creating resilience as a business owner, because it's so damn important. And the ways you can do that is obviously through experience. So knowing and recognizing what could have been, done a little bit differently, and implementing that going forward. Creating good policies and procedures to start with, so that you've got something to fall back on, but also ensuring that you're getting the support you need on a personal level. So you've mentioned before in terms of talking to psychologists. I love my psych. She's absolutely fabulous, and probably one of the best investments I've ever made into myself. In terms of creating resilience and changing me and shaping me to be, the person I am today. My psych has just been brilliant. So if you can find a good psych, good life coach, something along those lines, just really does make the world of difference.
And the other thing I would add to that is curate your circle. And I've been working really hard on this over the last 12 months, is surrounding myself with people who I can talk to openly and honestly. And it's very challenging because a lot of my friends I got through Pole and they were fellow instructors who are now my employees. So I obviously have to have now a different boundary there. But I've worked really hard on connecting myself with people who can give me energy and who I can talk to and know that I can speak openly and honestly to. So having a really good support group is probably another very important
Yeah.
thing to consider.
What I love is that you and I catch up pretty much every month ish.
Monthly, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And we catch up for a couple hours, and it's us time to actually sit down and support each other and to go through, okay, what are you doing with your business? Okay, what are you doing with yours? Have you thought about this? Or, hey, actually, what you're doing, look into this resource, because that would probably save you a lot of time. And we support each other as business people. So finding your circle is very helpful. And I'm very grateful to have you as a friend and mentor to me.
Me too. Like I think there's some of the best things that I've done is like reach out to people like you and be like, hey, can we just like catch up for a chat once a month?
So
Like
glad
some,
to hear
yeah,
that.
someone who I can actually talk to. So yeah, curating your circle is really, really important.
I've got one last question for you.
I know we've been talking for a long time, so I was like, I'll let you take the lead now.
Oh no, you're so fine. I mean, I'm worried about the fact that you probably have things to do and places to see and all those
I
things.
just have a sick husband downstairs, so it's probably better that I'm upstairs.
Yeah, no. Sorry, Ross. Love you, but
We love you, but time for me.
you can fend for yourself for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
My last question is about for studio owners who obviously we get into owning a pole studio. Usually, I'd like to think most people get into this because they're passionate about pole. They love pole so much and they want to be around pole 24/7. And my question is about for those who suddenly get into owning a studio and they maybe lose their passion, or they find that it's not as easy as what it seems in terms of being able to pole. Like they think owning a studio, they'll be polling every minute that they've got spare. What are your thoughts on that?
Not in my experience, 100% true. So I remember right before COVID hit, it was the first day and it was about 3 months after owning the studio. It's the first day I'd actually been able to just have a play in the studio and dance for myself, do my own training. I was so excited. And I remember going to a networking event that night and people asked me, how's the studio going? I'm like, yeah, it's really good. Like today I finally like found a really good rhythm and da da da. And like, what are you gonna do about COVID? I'm like, COVID? What's COVID? Anyway, COVID happened. So that changed a lot. But I honestly have lost my passion and I'm finding it very hard. I'm doing enough to maintain my skills. I find it hard to be a student in my own studio because even if people aren't talking to me like the studio owner, I'm looking up at the rigging and being like, oh, that needs like dusting, or that screw is a little bit loose. Like I'm thinking about everything else but not my own training. One thing I have done recently is I've got a pole for home so I can train pole at home because the studio is now my workplace. In terms of going to other studios to train, like that is definitely an option. And I've thought about it, but I also love my instructors that I have in my studio. So I want to train with them. I went through a period of doing private lessons, which was probably, if you can do that with an instructor, I would recommend if you want to keep your training because you can work at your own pace. I think it's probably important to note that before I brought the studio, I was recovering from a couple of injuries. So I wasn't in full like pole mode. I was literally contemplating quitting pole and not continuing with pole before this happened. So I was on the fence already. So I wasn't at my pole fitter. So if I had been, I may have had a different experience because other people still love to get in the studio and dance and do their thing. And
I was going to say, there's so many owners of studios that I know that they find the time, they're comfortable, that's, a happy place and they do really well. But it's probably something to think about is it's not for everyone that, suddenly going to your studio might actually just distract you when you go to it.
Somebody actually said to me recently, a friend, she's like, I feel for you because like you've lost your hobby. I'm like, yeah, I did. Through buying the studio, I lost my hobby. And I'm just finding new ways to work around that. Like, and in saying that though, my passion for pole for pole as an industry hasn't changed. I still love it. I still believe in what we do. I still love what it does for people. I'm just struggling to find my own training. And then on top of that, I obviously have all my injuries to deal with anyway. So it's not a linear thing for me. It's very wobbly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think for me, when Pole Physio ramped up, I didn't lose my hobby because I also had an injury at the same time, but I found it so much more difficult to get to the studio. And I don't even own the studio, but like I just remember going, and I've got my pole downstairs, but like, and I can pole anytime, but I just remember going boundaries so much harder. And I talk about pole, I'm showing stuff on a pole a lot of the days to my patients. The last thing I necessarily want to do is go and do more pole stuff. So yeah, it's
And you might want to find another hobby, but then where do you have the time to find another hobby? So I've just like recently, I've just started doing like small light workouts with my neighbor because it keeps me active. I enjoy her company. Like that's what I can do to sort of keep myself fit, which is obviously comes across the pole. So I have also started taking just one dance class a week in the studio.
nice.
So just find baby steps. You might lose it and you might get it back.
Well, last year it was my goal, and I'm very happy that managed to stick to it. Was I wanted to do 3 classes a week, 2 dance classes, 1 trick level, and turned up for those. Was very, very happy with that. Got my passion, got my mojo back after the year before, which was definitely really challenging as pole physio started. So you go through stages, that's for sure.
You do. You do. And that's okay. You've got to be kind to yourself. And yeah, you've got to just remember that it is a long journey. Hopefully we all want to be here for a long time. So don't sprint. You will have areas of sprint, but it is a bit more of a marathon. So prepare yourself and look after yourself.
Look after yourself, be kind to yourself. They're probably the take home messages is, there's so much that we've packed into, this episode, but look after yourself because you should come first.
Yes. And I remember when I took the business over from the previous owner, one thing she said to me is like, this business doesn't exist without you. So what you do for you in terms of paying yourself, looking after yourself, your mental health, everything. If you don't have that if you don't have that in check.
Don't have that shit, yeah.
If you don't have that shit in check, your business is not going to be okay. So you need to look after you before you can give wholeheartedly to your business. And you will go through phases where you can't give wholeheartedly to your business. And that's okay.
Yeah.
As long as you're still supporting your people in a way that you can do it with your boundaries in place to look after yourself.
Wow. That was an incredible episode. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the chat.
I appreciate you so much. I appreciate all your knowledge and bringing it to the Pole Physio community, and obviously appreciate you on a personal level for so many different reasons as a mentor and a friend. So thank you so much. In terms of where people can find you,
I'm not used to being on this end of that comment.
I know. Again, we're flipping the script.
Yeah.
So in terms of for anyone who wants to come and learn at your studio, so Addictive Pole Fitness.
We're at Addictive Pole Fitness everywhere. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We've also got online, like free online stuff on YouTube. If you want to listen to our podcast, it's at uncovered.pd. It's 100% all about pole dancing. It's pretty epic. Simone's got some great episodes, so highly recommend. She talks a lot in them too, which is great. And my personal page is at Steph, I think _APF. So if you go into Uncovered, you'll be able to find me because I think I'm tagged in that comment. But I do want to say a huge thank you to you, Simone, for running this series. And I just know you give so much to the community. I really appreciate what you've done because my instructors learn from it. My students learn from it. I learn from it. And I just think it's such a great resource. And yeah, I couldn't imagine the world without the Pole Physio at this point. You've just made such a huge impact. I definitely know for the people of which I am surrounded by. So thank you for doing what you do.
Too emotional there, but thank you. That's the reason why we created the Pole Physio. Again, we're talking about our whys. That's the reason why, is to make a change within the pole community. That's what it comes down to, a change for the better. So I'm very glad to hear that. That's for sure. Yeah. I was about to say, and it can't be done without being surrounded by people like yourself and everyone else who's come on the speaker series. So yeah, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it's going to be so good. I'm excited.
Yeah. And if anyone wants to train with your particular studio, they can find you. For those who live in Queensland, they can find you in Underwood.
Yeah, we're located in Underwood, so we're halfway between Brisbane and the Gold Coast. So if you're visiting Brisbane or the Gold Coast, we're literally halfway between. So come train with us. We have a huge timetable, great instructors. I'm 100% biased because I love my girls.
I love them too.
Yeah, they're very, very good. So yeah, come pole with us. We have lots of drop-ins. We have a huge drop-in for what most people call casual classes. So yeah, come check us out. Come take a photo with that pink glittery neon wall. That's what everybody tends to do. So
Fun.
glitter.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Steph. Thanks for
No,
your
thank
time.
you for having me.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you got everything that you wanted, or at least a really good basic structure anyway. There's so much we can go into in terms of business and all the little caveats of it. But yes, hopefully you got a good outline as to how to go about potentially the journey to studio ownership. So thanks.
And if you have any questions, just reach out. More than happy to answer them openly and honestly.
Oh, you're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again and for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone at the next summer speaker event. Thanks and bye.
Bye.